Wednesday, 100 verses of Bhagwat Gita. He who has mastered his senses is exclusively devoted to his practice and is full of faith, attains knowledge. Having had the revelation of truth, he immediately attains supreme peace in the form of God realization. He who lacks discrimination is devoid of faith and is at the same time possessed by doubt, is lost to the spiritual path. For the doubting soul, there is neither this world nor the world beyond, nor even happiness. Arjun, actions do not bind him who has dedicated all his actions to God according to the spirit of Karam Yoga, whose doubts have been dispelled by wisdom and who is self possessed. Therefore, Arjun, slashing to pieces with the sword of knowledge, this doubt in your heart, born of ignorance, establish yourself in Karam Yoga in the shape of even mindedness and stand up for this fight. Thus, in the Upanishads sung by the Lord, the science of Brahma, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjun ends the fourth chapter entitled The Yoga of Knowledge as well as the disciplines of action and knowledge. Chapter 5 Arjuna said, Krishna, you extol Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, and then the yoga of action. Pray, tell me which of the two is decidedly conducive to my good. Sri Bhagwan said, the yoga of knowledge and the yoga of action both lead to supreme bliss. Of the two, however, the yoga of action, being easier of practice, is superior to the yoga of knowledge. The Karam yogi, who neither hates nor desires, should ever be considered a man of renunciation. For Arjun, he who is free from the pairs of opposites is easily liberated from bondage. It is the ignorant, not the wise, who say that Sankhya Yoga and Karam Yoga lead to divergent results. For one who is firmly established in either gets the fruit of both, which is the same, which is God realization. The supreme state, which is reached by the Sankhya Yogi, is attained also by the Karma Yogi. Therefore, he alone who sees Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga as identical so far as their result goes, sees truly. Without Karma Yoga, however, Sankhya Yoga, that is renunciation of doership in relation to all activities of the mind, senses, and body, is difficult to accomplish, whereas the Karma Yogi, who keeps his mind fixed on God, reaches Brahma in no time, Arjun. The Karma Yogi, who has fully conquered his mind and mastered his senses, whose heart is pure, and who has identified himself with the self of all beings, God, remains untainted even though performing action. However, the Sankhya Yogi, who knows the reality of things, must believe that he does nothing, even though seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating or drinking, walking, sleeping, breathing, speaking, answering the calls of nature, grasping and opening or closing the eyes, holding that it is the senses alone that are moving among their objects. He who acts offering all actions to God and shaking off attachment remains untouched by sin as the lotus leaf by water. The Karam yogis perform action only with their senses, mind, intellect, and body as well, without the feeling of mind in respect of them and shaking off attachment simply for the sake of self purification. Offering the fruit of actions to God, the Karam yogi attains everlasting peace in the shape of God realization, whereas he who works with a selfish motive, being attached to the fruit of action through desires, gets tied down. The self-controlled Sankhya yogi, doing nothing himself and getting nothing done by others, rests happily in God, the embodiment of truth, knowledge, and bliss, mentally relegating all actions to the mention of nine gates, the body with nine openings. God determines neither the doership nor the doings of men, nor even their contact with the fruit of actions, but it is nature alone that functions. The omnipresent God does not partake the virtue or sin of anyone. Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance. Hence, it is that beings are constantly falling a prey to delusion. In the case, however, of those who said ignorance has been destroyed by true knowledge of God, that wisdom shining like the sun reveals the Supreme. Those whose mind and intellect are wholly merged in them, who remain constantly established in identity with Him, and have finally become one with Him, their sins being wiped out by wisdom, reach the supreme goal when there is no return. The wise look with equanimity on all, whether it be a Brahman endowed with learning and culture, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a pariah too. Even here is the mortal plane conquered by those whose mind is established in unity, since the Absolute is untouched by evil and is the same to all, hence they are established in the eternal. He who, with a firm intellect and free from doubt, rejoices not on obtaining what is pleasant and does not feel perturbed on meeting with the unpleasant. That knower of Brahma lives eternally in identity with Brahma. He whose mind remains unattached to sense objects derives through meditation the sattvic joy which dwells in the mind. Then that yogi, having completely identified himself through meditation with Brahma, enjoys eternal bliss. The pleasures which are born of sense contacts are verily a source of suffering only, though appearing as enjoyable to worldly minded people. They have a beginning and an end. They come and go. Arjun, it is for this reason that a wise man does not indulge in them. He alone who is able to withstand in this very life, before casting off this body, the urges of lust and anger is a yogi, and he alone is a happy man. He who is happy within himself enjoys within himself the delight of the soul, and even so is illumined by the inner light, light of the soul. Such a yogi, Sankhya yogi, identified with Brahma, attains Brahma, who is all peace. The seers whose sins have been purged, whose doubts have been dispelled by knowledge, whose disciplined mind is firmly established in God, and who are devoted to the welfare of all beings, attain Brahma, who is all peace. To those wise men who are free from lust and anger, who have subdued their mind and have realized God, Brahma, the abode of eternal peace, is present all round. Shutting out all thoughts of external enjoyments with the gaze fixed on the space between the eyebrows, having regulated the pran outgoing and the apan incoming, breaths flowing within the nostril, he who has brought his senses, mind, and intellect under control, such a contemplative soul intent on liberation and free from desire, fear, and anger is even ever liberated. Having known me in reality as the enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all the worlds, and the selfless friend of all beings, my devotee attains peace. Thus, in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the sign of Brahma, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjun ends the fifth chapter, entitled The Yoga of Action and Knowledge. Chapter 6. Sri Bhagwan said, He who does his duty without expecting the fruit of actions is a sannyasi, Sankhya yogi, and a yogi, Karam yogi, both. He is no sannyasi who has merely renounced the sacred fire. Even so, he is no yogi who has merely given up all activity. Arjun, you must know that what they call sannyas is no other than yoga, for none becomes a yogi who has not abandoned his sankalpas, thoughts of the world. To the contemplative soul who desires to attain karma yoga, selfless action is said to be the means. For the same man, when he is established in yoga, absence of all sankalps, thoughts of the world, is said to be the way to blessedness. When a man ceases to have any attachment for the objects of senses and for actions and has renounced all sankalps, thoughts of the world, he is said to have attained yoga. One should lift oneself by one's own efforts and should not degrade oneself, for one's own self is one's friend and one's own self is one's enemy. One's own self is the friend of the soul, by whom the lower self, consisting of the mind, senses, and body, has been conquered. Even so, the very self of him who has not conquered his lower self behaves antagonistically like an enemy. The Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of the self controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites, such as cold and heat, joy and sorrow, and honor and economy. The yogi whose mind is sated with Gyan, knowledge of Nirgun Brahma, and Vigyan, knowledge of manifest divinity, who is unmoved under any circumstances, whose senses are completely under control, and to whom earth, stone, and gold are all alike, is spoken of as God realized soul. He who looks upon well wishers and neutrals, as well as meditators, friends and foes, relatives and inimicals, the virtuous and the sinful with equanimity, stands supreme. Living in seclusion all by himself, the yogi who has controlled his mind and body and is free from desires and void of possessions should constantly engage his mind in meditation. Having firmly set his seat in a spot which is free from dirt and other impurities with a sacred kusha grass, a deer skin, and a cloth spread thereon, once one upon the other, kusha below, deer skin in the middle, and cloth uppermost, neither very high nor very low, and occupying that seat, concentrating the mind and controlling the functions of the mind and senses, he should practice yoga for self purification, holding the trunk, head, and neck straight and steady, remaining firm and fixing the gaze on the tip of his nose without looking in other directions, firm in the vow of complete chastity and fearless, keeping himself perfectly calm and with the mind held in restraint and fixed on me, the vigilant yogi should sit absorbed in me. Thus, constantly applying his mind to me, the yogi of disciplined mind attains everlasting peace consisting of supreme bliss, which abides in me. Arjun, this yoga is neither for him who overeats, nor for him who observes complete fast. It is neither for him who is given to too much sleep, nor even for him who is ceaselessly awake. Yoga, which rids one of woe, is accomplished only by him who is regulated in diet and recreation, regulated in performing actions, and regulated in sleep and wakefulness. When the mind, which is thoroughly disciplined, gets riveted on God alone, then the person who is free from yearning for all enjoyments is said to be established in yoga. As a flame does not flicker in a windless place, such is stated to be the picture of the disciplined mind of the yogi practicing meditation on God. The state in which the chit, the mind stuff, subdued through the practice of yoga, becomes passive, and in which realizing God through subtle reasoning, purified by meditation on God, the soul rejoices only in God. Nay, in which the soul experiences the internal and supersensuous joy which can be initiated only through the subtle and purified intellect, and wherein established the said yogi moves not from the truth on any account, and having obtained which he does not reckon any other gain as greater than that, and established in which he is not shaken even by the heaviest of sorrows. That state called yoga, which is free from the contact of sorrow in the form of transmigration, should be known. Nay, this yoga should be resolutely practiced with an unwearied mind, completely renouncing all desires arising from sankalps, thoughts of the world, and fully restraining all the senses from all sides by the mind. He should, through gradual practice, attain tranquility and fixing the mind on God through reason, controlled by steadfastness. He should not think of anything else drawing back the restless and fidgety mind from all those objects after which it runs. He should repeatedly fix it on God. For to the yogi whose mind is perfectly serene, who is sinless, whose passion is subdued, and who is identified with Brahma, the embodiment of truth, knowledge, and bliss, supreme happiness comes as a matter of course. The sinless yogi, thus uniting his self constantly with God, easily enjoys the eternal bliss of oneness with Brahma. The yogi who is united in identity with the all pervading infinite consciousness, whose vision everywhere is even, beholds the self existing in all beings and all beings as assumed in the self. He who sees me, the universal self present in all beings, and all beings existing within me, he is never lost to me, nor am I ever lost to him. The yogi who is established in union with me and worships me as residing in all beings as their very self, though engaged in all forms of activities, dwells in me, Arjun. He looks on all as one, on the analogy of his own self, and looks upon the joy and sorrow of all equally. Such a yogi is deemed to be the highest of all. Arjun said, Krishna, owing to the restlessness of mind, I do not perceive the stability of this yoga in the form of equanimity, which you have just spoken of. For Krishna, the mind is very unsteady, turbulent, tenacious, and powerful. Therefore, I consider it as difficult to control as the wind. Sri Bhagwan said, the mind is restless, no doubt, and difficult to curb, Arjun, but it can be brought under control by repeated practice of meditation and by the exercise of dispassion, O son of Kunti. Yoga is difficult of achievement by one whose mind is not subdued by him. However, who has the mind under control and is ceaselessly striving, it can be easily attained through practice. Such is my conviction. Arjun said, Krishna, what becomes of the aspirant who, though endowed with faith, has not been able to subdue his passions and whose mind is therefore diverted from yoga at the time of death, and who thus fails to reach perfection in yoga, God realization? Krishna, swayed from the path leading to God realization and without anything to stand upon, is he not lost like the scattered cloud, deprived of both God realization and heavenly enjoyment? Krishna, only you are capable to remove this doubt of mind completely, for none other than you can dispel this doubt. Sri Bhagwan said, Dear Arjun, there is no fall for him, either here or hereafter. For, O my beloved, none who strives for self redemption, that is God realization, ever meets with evil destiny. Such a person who has strayed from yoga obtains the higher worlds, heavens, etc., to which men of meritorious deeds alone are entitled, and having resided there for innumerable years, takes birth of pious and prosperous parents. Or, if he is possessed of dispassion, then not attaining to those regions, he is born in the family of enlightened yogis. But such a birth in this world is very difficult to obtain, Arjun. He automatically regains in that birth the spiritual insight of his previous birth, and though through that he strives harder than ever for perfection in the form of God realization. The other one who takes birth in a rich family, through under the sway of his senses, feels drawn towards God by force of the habit acquired in his previous birth. Nay, even the seeker of enlightenment on yoga, in the form of even mindedness, transcends the fruit of actions performed with some interested motive as laid down in the Vedas. The yogi, however, who diligently takes up the practice, attains perfection in this very life with the help of latencies of many births and being thoroughly purged of sin, forthwith reaches the supreme state. The yogi is superior to the ascetics. He is regarded superior even to those versed in sacred lore. The yogi is also superior to those who perform action with some interested motive. Therefore, Arjun, do become a yogi. Of all yogis, again, he who devotedly worships me with his mind focused on me is considered by me to be the best yogi. Thus, in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahma, the scripture of Yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, ends the sixth chapter entitled The Yoga of Self Control. Chapter 7. Sri Bhagwan said, Arjun, now listen, how with the mind attached to me through exclusive love and practicing yoga with absolute dependence on me, you will know me, the repository of all power, strength, and glory, and other attributes, the universal soul in entirety and without any shadow of doubt. I shall unfold to you in its entirety the wisdom, knowledge of God in his absolute formless aspect, along with the knowledge of the qualified aspect of God, both with form and without form, having known which nothing else remains yet to be known in this world. Hardly one among thousands of men strives to realize me. Of those striving yogis, again, some rare one devoting himself exclusively to me knows me in reality. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, reason, and also ego. These constitute my nature divided into eight parts. This indeed is my lower material nature. The other than this, by which the whole universe is sustained, know it to be my higher or spiritual nature in the form of G, the life principle, Arjun. Arjun, know that all beings have evolved from this twofold Prakriti and that I am the source of the entire creation, and into me again it dissolves. There is nothing else besides me, Arjun. Like clusters of yarn beads formed by knots on a thread, all this is threaded on me, Arjun. I am the sap in water and the radiance of the moon and the sun. I am the sacred syllable Om in all the Vedas, the sound in the ether and virility in men. I am the pure order, the subtle principle of smell in the earth, and the brightness in fire. Nay, I am the life of all beings and austerity in the ascetics. Arjun, know me the eternal seed of all beings. I am the intelligence of the intelligent, the glory of the glorious am I. Arjun, of the mighty I am the might, free from passion and desire. In beings, I am the sexual desire not conflicting with virtue or scriptural injunctions. Whatever other entities there are, born of sattva, the quality of goodness, and those that are born of rajas, the principle of activity, and tamas, the principle of inertia, know them all as evolved from me alone. In reality, however, neither do I exist in them nor do they in me. The whole of this creation is deluded by these objects, evolved from the three modes of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. That is why the world fails to recognize me, standing apart from these, the imperishable. For this most wonderful Maya, veil of mind, consisting of the three gunas, modes of nature, is extremely difficult to break through. Those, however, who constantly adore me alone are able to cross it. Those whose wisdom has been carried away by Maya and are of demoniac nature, such foolish and vile men of evil deeds do not adore me. Four types of devotees of noble deeds worship me, Arjun: the seeker after worldly possessions, the afflicted, the seeker for knowledge, and the men of wisdom, O best of Bharats. Of these, the best is the man of wisdom, ever established in identity with me and possessed of exclusive devotion. For I am extremely dear to the wise man who knows me in reality, and he is extremely dear to me. Indeed, all these are noble, but the man of wisdom is my very self. Such is my view. For such a devotee who has his mind and intellect merged in me is firmly established in me alone as the highest goal. In the very last of all births, an enlightened person worship me by realizing that all this is God. Such a great soul is very rare indeed. Those whose wisdom has been carried away by various desires, being prompted by their own nature, worship other deities, adopting norms relating to each. Whatever celestial form a devotee craving for some worldly objects chooses to worship with reverence. Okay. So those whose wisdom has been carried away by various desires, being prompted by their own nature, worship other deities, adopting norms relating to each. This is the 100 verses for till Wednesday.